All right. I'm just gonna take. Looks like there's something stuck in here. Yeah, just ever since she was.
Hi.
Some sleep until I started having these dreams. Maya, I'm scaring my daughter. This.
Gemma. Between this world
Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use.
There are some horror movies that scare you with loud noises, sudden appearances, and creatures jumping out of the darkness. But the Insidious franchise has always tried to do something a little different. It takes a place that we normally cannot see, gives it a name, and then makes us wonder what could happen if that place somehow found a way into our world. That place is the Further. And with Insidious, Out of the Further, the story once again takes us into that terrifying space where the rules of life and death are not what they seem. This time, however, the danger feels different because the real question is not simply whether someone can enter the Further. The question is what happens when something from the Further finds a way to come back. The new movie continues the supernatural horror world that audiences have been following since the original Insidious. Instead of simply repeating the same family story from earlier chapters, the film introduces a new central character and a new situation while keeping the mythology that made the franchise popular. At the heart of the story is Gemma, a young mother whose connection to the Further becomes the most important part of the entire nightmare. What begins as something mysterious slowly develops into a terrifying ability. And that ability creates a problem far bigger than Gemma could ever imagine. Gemma is not presented as someone who understands the supernatural world from the beginning. Like most people who become involved with the Further, she is pulled into something she never asked for. She is also a mother, which makes the situation much more personal. When your own family is in danger, fear becomes more than simply trying to survive. Every decision becomes a choice between protecting the people you love and risking yourself to understand what is actually happening. That emotional side is important because supernatural horror works best when the audience cares about the people being threatened. If a character feels like they are simply walking through a haunted house waiting for the next jump scare, the tension eventually disappears. But when the character has something real to lose, even a quiet hallway can become frightening. That is where Gemma's story has the potential to become one of the more interesting chapters in the franchise. The biggest mystery surrounding her is her unusual connection to the Further. In previous Insidious stories, entering the Further has always been dangerous. It is a realm filled with lost souls, spirits, demons, and entities that do not belong in the world of the living. But Gemma's situation changes the equation. She discovers that her connection to the Further may allow her to do something that could completely change the balance between that realm and our own. And this is where the title Out of the Further starts to make sense. The Further has always been frightening, because it exists somewhere beyond our normal understanding. You can enter it, but getting back is never guaranteed. You can encounter things there that have been waiting for someone to notice them. But imagine if the barrier between the Further and the real world started becoming weaker. Imagine if the things hiding in that darkness no longer needed a human to travel toward them. Instead, they could come through the other direction. That idea gives the new story a much larger sense of danger. Gemma's ability becomes both a potential weapon and a curse. At first, something like this might sound useful. If you can travel into the Further and return, perhaps you could understand the spirits. Perhaps you could find answers that normal people could never discover. But supernatural abilities in the Insidious universe rarely come without consequences. The more you interact with the Further, the more attention you attract from the things living there. And once those entities realize what Gemma is capable of, the situation changes completely. She is no longer simply someone trying to escape the supernatural world. She becomes someone the supernatural world wants. That creates a dangerous relationship between Gemma and the entities surrounding her. They have something she needs, and she has something they want. The problem is that Gemma may not fully understand the value of her own ability until it is already too late. The movie also brings back Lynn Shay as Elise Rainier, one of the most recognizable figures in the entire franchise. Elise has always been important to the mythology of Insidious because she understands things that ordinary people cannot. Her experience with the Further gives her a completely different perspective on supernatural events. When someone like Gemma becomes connected to that world, Elise's presence immediately raises another question. How much does she already know about what is happening? That is one of the reasons her return is exciting for longtime fans. Elise is not simply another character who happens to appear in a horror movie. She represents the history of this universe. Her knowledge connects the new story to everything that came before. While the new characters give the franchise a chance to move into unfamiliar territory, the cast also includes Amelia Eve, Brandon Perea, Maisie Richardson Sellers, Sam Spruill, Island Austin, and Laura Gordon. With a new group of characters surrounding Gemma, the movie has the opportunity to create a fresh, emotional dynamic rather than relying entirely on familiar faces. But the biggest attraction will still be the horror itself. The trailer and promotional material have already made one thing clear. The Further is not going to remain safely separated from the real world. That concept alone creates several possibilities. A normal house can become dangerous. A familiar room can become a doorway. A person standing in front of you might not be what they appear to be. And the scariest part is that the characters may not know when the boundary has been crossed. That uncertainty is exactly what makes this kind of horror effective. You do not necessarily need to see a monster every few seconds. Sometimes the fear comes from wondering whether something is already there. A shadow in the background, a strange movement, an empty room, or a door that should not be open can become frightening when the audience understands that the Further may be closer than anyone realizes. The movie is directed by Jacob Chase, who is also responsible for the screenplay. His involvement is particularly interesting because Insidious, Out of the Further is not simply another continuation of the same formula. The story appears to be built around a new, supernatural idea while still respecting the mythology established by earlier films. And that balance will be important. If the movie becomes too dependent on previous characters and references, it could feel like a nostalgia project. But if it completely ignores the history of the franchise, longtime fans may wonder why this story is part of the Insidious universe at all. The strongest approach is somewhere in the middle. Introduce something new while keeping the elements that made the original movies memorable. The release of this movie also marks another important moment for the franchise because Insidious has already gone through several different stages. The original movie introduced audiences to the Further. Later chapters expanded the mythology and explored different characters and timelines. The Red Door brought attention back to the Lambert family, while this new film appears ready to move forward with a different family and a different supernatural problem. That makes Out of the Further feel less like a simple repeat and more like an attempt to open another door inside the same universe. And honestly, that door might be the most dangerous one yet, because if Gemma can enter the Further and bring something back with her, the normal rules of supernatural horror have changed. Before, the living had to worry about entering a world controlled by spirits. Now, the spirits may have a way to enter ours. And once that happens, there may be nowhere safe to hide. The most interesting part of the story may ultimately be Gemma herself. She has to learn what her ability means while dealing with the consequences of using it. Every time she interacts with the Further, she risks exposing herself and the people around her to something they may not be prepared to face. Her journey is therefore not just about defeating a supernatural enemy. It is about understanding whether the power she has discovered can actually be controlled. That creates a difficult question for her. If you had the ability to enter a place where lost souls and dangerous entities exist, would you use that ability to save someone you love, even if you knew you might bring something back with you? For Gemma, there may not be an easy answer, and that is where Insidious, Out of the Further has the potential to become more than another haunted house movie. Beneath the supernatural horror is a story about fear, family, sacrifice, and the consequences of opening a door that was never meant to be opened. By the time the story reaches its most dangerous point, the audience may realize that the real threat was never simply what was waiting inside the Further. The real threat was the possibility that the Further was waiting for a way out. And if Gemma becomes that way out, then saving herself may no longer be enough. She may have to find a way to close the connection before the darkness spreads beyond the people who first encountered it. That is the central mystery surrounding this new chapter. And it is exactly what makes the movie worth watching for fans of the franchise. The story takes a familiar supernatural concept and turns it around. Instead of asking whether a person can survive the Further, it asks what could happen if the Further starts surviving through us. What could happen if the Further starts surviving through us? What makes the idea even more disturbing is that Gemma's connection to the Further could completely change the way the characters understand the supernatural world. For years, the Further has been treated as a separate realm, a place that exists beyond ordinary reality. But if that separation can be broken, then the danger is no longer limited to people with special abilities. Ordinary people could become targets without even knowing why. A family could be sitting together at home, believing they are safe, while something invisible is already watching them. A person could enter a room and have no idea that the room has become connected to another world. And the worst part is that the characters may not immediately understand what has happened. This is where the title becomes more than just a name. Out of the Further suggests movement in the opposite direction. The horror is coming outward. The darkness is no longer staying where it belongs. For Gemma, that creates an impossible situation. She has discovered something powerful, but power is not always the same thing as control. You can know how to open a door without knowing what will walk through it. You can know how to enter a dangerous place without knowing how to keep that danger from following you home. That distinction could become one of the most important themes in the entire movie. The return of Elise Rainier adds another layer to that story because Elise understands the consequences of dealing with the Further better than almost anyone. Her experience could help Gemma understand what she is facing, but it could also reveal that the situation is far more serious than Gemma initially believes. Elise has seen people become trapped by supernatural forces before. She has seen what happens when someone becomes too connected to the Further. So when she becomes involved in this new situation, her knowledge could be the difference between finding a way out and becoming another victim. But even Elise may be facing something different this time. If the problem is no longer simply someone entering the Further, then the old methods may not be enough. The characters cannot simply focus on bringing someone back. They have to deal with the possibility that the boundary itself is changing, and that gives the horror a much bigger scale. The supporting cast also becomes important, because a story like this needs characters who react differently to the supernatural. Some may believe Gemma immediately. Others may question what she is experiencing. Some might try to protect her, while others could become afraid of what her ability means. Those different reactions can create tension even when there is no supernatural creature on screen. Imagine telling someone that you can enter another realm and bring something back with you. Would they believe you? Or would they think you were imagining everything? And if something terrifying actually appeared, would they trust you enough to listen to your warning? That kind of uncertainty can make the story feel much more personal. The trailer also gives audiences an idea of the movie's darker direction without revealing everything. Instead of explaining every mystery, the promotional material focuses on the central idea that the Further is becoming connected to the world of the living. That is probably the smartest way to promote a movie like this because the less we know about the exact rules, the more room there is for the film to surprise us. And horror needs surprise. If you know exactly when every scare is coming, the fear disappears. The best supernatural movies make viewers question what they just saw. They create moments where something feels wrong, before explaining why it feels wrong. That is especially important for the Insidious franchise because its strongest scares have often come from atmosphere, rather than simple violence. The darkness itself becomes part of the story. Hallway can feel dangerous. A bedroom can feel unsafe. A quiet house can feel completely different once you realize that something from the Further might be standing just outside your view. That atmosphere is likely to be a major part of Out of the Further. Another interesting element is the return of the franchise's familiar mythology. Even though the movie introduces a new family and a new central character, longtime viewers will recognize the world they are entering. The Further is still at the heart of the story, and Elise's presence gives the film a direct connection to the earlier chapters. That combination of familiar mythology and new characters could be exactly what the franchise needs. The original Insidious became memorable because it introduced a supernatural concept that felt different from the usual haunted house formula. Instead of simply having ghosts trapped inside a house, the story created an entire realm beyond our world. That idea gave the franchise room to grow. Now, Out of the Further appears to be taking that concept one step further. What happens when the realm itself begins reaching back? That question could carry the entire movie. The release is also arriving at an important point for horror audiences. Franchise movies are often judged against the films that came before them, so this new chapter has a difficult job. It needs to satisfy people who have followed Insidious for years, while also giving newcomers enough information to understand why the Further matters. The new story seems designed to do exactly that by focusing on Gemma's personal experience. Instead of beginning with a huge explanation of supernatural mythology, the audience can discover the rules alongside her. As Gemma learns more, the viewers learn more. As she becomes frightened, the audience understands why. That makes the story easier to connect with. And then there is the question of the demons and entities themselves. The Insidious universe has never been short of disturbing supernatural figures, but the real challenge for the new movie will be making the horror feel unpredictable. Familiar faces from the mythology may return, but the audience still needs to wonder what is coming next. The iconic imagery associated with the franchise can create instant recognition, but the story needs more than recognizable monsters. It needs a reason for them to be there. If Gemma's ability is what attracts them, then every supernatural encounter has a purpose. They are not appearing randomly. They are responding to her power. That makes Gemma the center of the conflict. She is not just being hunted because she happens to live in the wrong house. She may be hunted because she represents a doorway, and if she can open that doorway, then someone else might eventually learn how to use it. That possibility creates a larger threat than one family simply being haunted. It could mean that the consequences of Gemma's actions extend far beyond herself. This is also where the emotional side of the movie can become powerful. Gemma is a mother, and a mother's fear for her child is something almost every audience can understand. Even people who do not believe in ghosts can understand the instinct to protect family. If the supernatural world threatens that family, Gemma's choices become emotionally believable. She may be terrified. She may make mistakes. She may not understand everything happening around her, but she keeps moving forward because stopping could mean losing someone she loves. That is what can make a horror protagonist feel human. And if the movie succeeds in building that emotional connection, then the supernatural moments will have more impact. We'll not simply be watching a character run from a demon. We will be watching someone fight against something impossible because giving up is not an option. The movie is scheduled as a theatrical release, giving the audience the chance to experience its atmosphere on a much larger screen. For horror fans, that matters because sound and darkness are a major part of the experience. The right silence followed by a sudden sound can feel completely different in a theater full of people. But perhaps the biggest question is whether Insidious, Out of the Further, can make the further frightening again. After multiple movies, audiences already understand the basic concept. They know that the further is dangerous. They know that spirits can cross boundaries. They know that certain entities are capable of terrifying people. So the new movie has to give us a reason to be afraid of something we already know. The answer may be simple. This time, the door is opening from the other side. If the movie delivers on that idea, Out of the Further could become an important new chapter in the franchise. It has the familiar mythology, a new protagonist, a returning fan-favorite character, and a supernatural concept that raises the stakes without completely abandoning what came before. For longtime fans, the return of Elise gives the movie an emotional connection to the earlier films. For new viewers, Gemma's story provides a fresh starting point. And for horror fans in general, the idea of the further entering the real world creates plenty of opportunities for disturbing moments. The real test will come when the movie finally reveals just how far the darkness can spread, because entering the further has always been dangerous, but bringing the further back with you could be much worse. And that is the idea that stays with you after the trailer ends. Maybe the scariest place in the Insidious universe is not the further itself. Maybe the scariest possibility is that one day, you could look around your own home and realize that you are no longer standing completely in the world of the living. You may think the door is closed. You may think the danger is somewhere far away. But if Gemma's ability has changed the rules, then the distance between our world and the further may no longer matter. Distance between our world and the further may no longer matter. The deeper Gemma goes into this mystery, the more she begins to understand that her connection to the further is not something that simply appeared out of nowhere. There is a reason she can sense things that other people cannot, and there is a reason certain entities seem unusually interested in her. What first feels like a strange ability slowly starts to look like something that has been waiting to reveal itself. That realization changes the way Gemma looks at everything around her. A strange sound is no longer just a strange sound. A shadow disappearing from the corner of her eye is no longer something she can easily ignore. Even moments when the house is completely silent can feel threatening because she knows that silence does not necessarily mean she is alone. And this is where the movie can really play with the audience's expectations. Once you understand that something supernatural may be nearby, you start looking for it. You begin watching the background instead of the characters. You start wondering whether that door moved by itself, whether someone was standing behind the window, or whether the person Gemma is talking to is actually who they appear to be. The fear comes from not knowing. Gemma also begins to realize that trying to understand her ability may be just as dangerous as using it. Every time she reaches toward the further, she risks creating another connection. It is almost like calling a number that should never be answered. You may want information, but you cannot control who answers on the other end. That creates a difficult choice for her. If she refuses to use her ability, she may never discover how to protect her family. But if she continues using it, she could make the situation even worse. There is no perfect decision, and that is exactly what makes her journey interesting. As the supernatural events become harder to explain, the people around Gemma are forced to confront something they would probably rather ignore. The strange occurrences are no longer isolated incidents. They begin forming a pattern. Something is trying to get closer, and whatever it wants may be connected directly to Gemma's ability. At this point, the story starts moving away from the question of whether the supernatural is real. That question has already been answered. Now the question is what the supernatural wants. That difference is important because it gives the horror a sense of purpose. A random ghost appearing in a dark room can be scary, but an entity that has a specific goal can be much more frightening. If the characters understand that something is hunting them for a reason, then every interaction becomes part of a larger game, and Gemma may not even know the rules. This is where Elise's experience becomes extremely valuable. She has spent years dealing with people who have been touched by the further, and she understands that fear can make people vulnerable. When someone is desperate, they may make choices they would never normally make. They may open a door because they believe someone they love is trapped behind it. That is how the further can get inside people's lives. It does not always need to force its way in. Sometimes people invite it. For Gemma, the temptation could be overwhelming. If she believes there is someone she can save by entering the further, she may be willing to take the risk even after being warned about the consequences. That emotional conflict could become one of the most important parts of the story. Because the most dangerous decisions are often the ones we make for the right reasons. She is not searching for power. She is not trying to communicate with spirits because she wants to. She is trying to protect the people she loves. But the further does not care about good intentions. The entities within it may see Gemma's compassion as a weakness. They may understand that if they threaten someone she loves, she will come looking for them. And once she crosses that boundary willingly, they have exactly what they need. That possibility creates a frightening trap. Imagine knowing that the person you love is trapped somewhere beyond your reach. You have one chance to bring them back, but the only way to reach them is by entering the very place you have been warned to avoid. Would you stay safe, or would you go after them? That is the kind of decision that can push Gemma deeper into the further, and once she enters, the movie can become visually and emotionally different. The normal rules of reality begin to disappear. Familiar locations can become distorted. Time can feel strange. Sounds may come from places where nobody is standing. Things that look harmless can suddenly become threatening. The further has always worked because it feels like a twisted reflection of the real world. It is recognizable enough to make you feel comfortable for a moment. But something is always wrong. A room may look exactly like a room from the real world, but the atmosphere tells you that you are somewhere else. A person may look familiar, but you cannot be certain they are safe. A doorway may lead somewhere completely different from where it should. That uncertainty gives the movie a lot of room to create suspense. And perhaps the most disturbing thing Gemma discovers is that not everything inside the further is interested in attacking her immediately. Some entities may simply watch. They may wait. They may allow her to believe she is in control before revealing what they actually want. That kind of patience can be more frightening than aggression, because if something attacks you, you know it is dangerous. But if something watches you from the darkness and waits for the perfect moment, you have no idea what it is planning. This is also where the story can connect back to the larger mythology of Insidious. The further has never been portrayed as a simple world filled with one type of ghost. It contains different spirits and entities, each with different motives and levels of danger. Some are lost, some are trapped, some are hostile, and some may be far more powerful than the characters realize. Gemma's ability could therefore attract attention from more than one entity. While she may initially believe she is dealing with a single threat, she could eventually discover that several forces are interested in the same doorway. That would make the situation much more complicated, because defeating one entity does not necessarily solve the problem. Another could still be waiting. Another could still be watching, and another could be looking for a way into the real world. This is where Elise may have to make a difficult decision of her own. Her experience tells her that some doors should never be opened, but Gemma's situation may force her to consider breaking rules she has followed for years. Sometimes knowing the danger does not make the choice easier. It makes it harder. Elise knows what the further can take from people. She knows that some journeys cannot be undone, and she knows that even when someone returns, they may not return exactly the same. That fear becomes especially important when Gemma starts spending more time connected to the further. The people around her may begin noticing changes before she does. Maybe she becomes quieter. Maybe she starts remembering things that never happened in the real world. Maybe she sees people who are not actually there. Or maybe the real danger is much simpler. Maybe something has followed her back. And if that has happened, Gemma may not even realize it yet. This is where the movie's tension can reach another level. The characters can no longer assume that the supernatural danger exists somewhere outside the house. It could already be standing among them. That possibility changes everything. Because when the threat is outside, you can lock the doors. When the threat is inside, there is nowhere left to lock. And for Gemma, that may be the moment when she finally understands what her ability has truly cost her. She wanted a way to reach the further. Now she may have to find a way to make sure the further cannot reach her. The closer she gets to the truth, the more dangerous that mission becomes. Because the answer she is looking for may be connected to the very thing hunting her. And eventually, Gemma will have to face the one question she has been avoiding from the beginning. If the further is trying so desperately to get out, why did it choose her as the door? To get out, why did it choose her as the door? The question of why the further has chosen Gemma does not have an easy answer, and that uncertainty becomes one of the most unsettling parts of her journey. Up until this point, Gemma has been trying to understand what is happening to her, but now she has to consider the possibility that everything happening around her has been connected from the beginning. Her ability may not simply be a strange gift. It may be the reason the darkness has finally found a path into her world. That possibility changes how she remembers the events that came before. Things she once dismissed as coincidences suddenly begin to feel connected. Strange dreams, unexplained moments, and the feeling that someone is watching her may all have been warning signs. The frightening part is that she may have been noticing them long before she understood what they meant. And when you look back at the mythology of the further, that idea makes the situation even more dangerous. People do not simply enter that place and walk away without consequences. Every connection leaves something behind. Sometimes it is a memory, sometimes it is fear, and sometimes it is something that refuses to let go. Gemma begins to understand that the relationship between the living and the further is not as simple as she once believed. She cannot just enter another realm, find an answer, and return home as if nothing happened. The further remembers the people who enter it. And now it remembers her. This creates a growing sense of paranoia around Gemma. She cannot always trust what she sees, and she cannot always trust what she remembers. The supernatural world can manipulate perception, making it difficult to separate reality from illusion. A conversation that feels completely normal can suddenly take on a different meaning when Gemma realizes that something about it was wrong. That kind of uncertainty can be more terrifying than a creature standing directly in front of her, because if you know something is there, you can run. But what do you do when you are not sure whether anything is there at all? This is also where the people around Gemma begin to become important. Her family does not experience the further the way she does. They cannot see everything she sees, and they may not understand why she is becoming increasingly afraid. From their perspective, Gemma may simply be exhausted or overwhelmed. That creates emotional distance at exactly the moment she needs support the most. She wants them to believe her. She wants them to understand. But explaining the further to someone who has never experienced it is almost impossible, and every time Gemma struggles to explain what she is seeing, the people around her have to decide whether they trust her instincts or dismiss them. That decision could have serious consequences, because in a supernatural story, disbelief can be dangerous. If someone ignores the warning signs, they may unknowingly walk directly into the trap. A locked door might be opened, a strange object might be touched, a seemingly harmless room might become the center of something much darker. The danger is not always obvious. Sometimes, the most frightening moment comes when the characters realize that the warning they ignored was actually the only thing keeping them safe. Elise understands this better than anyone. Her experience gives her the ability to recognize patterns that other people miss. She knows that supernatural events rarely happen without a reason. When something from the further begins affecting the real world, there is usually a connection between the person being targeted and the entity responsible. That connection becomes the key to understanding Gemma's situation. But finding the key does not necessarily mean knowing how to use it. At least may be able to identify what is happening. But even she has to respect the danger involved. The further is not a place that can simply be controlled through knowledge. Understanding the rules does not guarantee survival, and this becomes especially important when Gemma starts considering another journey into the further. She knows she should not go. Everyone around her knows she should not go, but there may be something inside that realm that she cannot leave behind. Maybe it is an answer, maybe it is someone she loves, or maybe it is something that has been waiting for her. Whatever the reason, Gemma eventually finds herself facing the same choice that has haunted people throughout the Insidious story. Stay in the safety of the world you understand, or step into the darkness because someone you care about needs you. The terrifying part is that Gemma already knows what the further looks like. She knows what waits there. She knows that returning is never guaranteed, and yet she still considers going back. That is what makes her different from someone who accidentally becomes trapped in a supernatural situation. Gemma is beginning to understand the danger, but she is also beginning to understand that avoiding the further may not be enough to save her family. If the connection between the two worlds continues growing, eventually the danger may come to them anyway. So perhaps the only way to stop it is to go directly toward the source. That decision pushes the story into a much darker phase. When Gemma enters the further again, the experience is no longer about curiosity. She is no longer trying to discover whether the realm exists. She knows it exists. Now she is searching for something specific. And the deeper she travels, the more she begins to see pieces of the truth. The further is not simply an empty world filled with ghosts. It feels almost alive. Places change. Distances become meaningless. Things that should be far away can suddenly appear close. And the darkness seems to react to the presence of someone living. Gemma realizes that she is not invisible there. She is being noticed. The feeling of being watched becomes stronger with every step. At first, she tries to ignore it. Then she hears something behind her. She turns around. Nothing. She continues walking. Then she hears it again, this time closer. The natural reaction would be to run. But running through the further is not always the safest choice. You do not know where you are going, and you do not know what might be waiting around the next corner. Gemma has to keep moving while fighting the instinct to panic. That is where her connection to the further may actually become useful. She begins to understand that fear itself can become a trap. If she allows the environment to control her emotions, she may lose the ability to distinguish reality from illusion. The entities can use fear against her, creating images designed to make her turn back or make a mistake. So Gemma has to stay calm, but staying calm while surrounded by things that should not exist is easier said than done. And then she sees something that changes everything. It is something familiar, something from her own life. For a moment, Gemma believes she has finally found what she came looking for, but there is something wrong. The person standing in front of her is smiling. The voice sounds familiar. The face looks right, yet something about the way they are standing tells Gemma that this is not real. She does not move. She does not answer, and slowly, the expression on the figure's face begins to change. That is when Gemma realizes the entity has learned something important about her. It knows what she loves. It knows what she fears, and it knows exactly what image will make her lower her guard. The danger is no longer simply physical. It has become personal. Gemma understands that if she wants to survive, she cannot trust everything the further shows her. She has to trust herself. But even that becomes difficult when the darkness starts showing her things she desperately wants to believe are real, because the most dangerous lie is not that one that frightens you. It is the one that gives you hope. Asterisk. It is the one that gives you hope. Asterisk. The figure standing in front of Gemma looks exactly like someone she knows, and for a few seconds, everything feels strangely peaceful. That is what makes the moment so dangerous. There is no screaming, no sudden attack, and no obvious sign that something is wrong. The figure simply stands there, waiting for Gemma to believe what she is seeing. But Gemma has already learned that the further does not give people what they want without asking for something in return. She watches carefully, looking for the smallest detail that might expose the illusion. The voice sounds familiar, the face looks familiar, and even the way the person speaks seems right. Yet Gemma feels something that she cannot explain. It is the same feeling she has experienced every time she has been close to something truly dangerous. Something is wrong. The figure takes a step toward her, and Gemma immediately steps back. That reaction changes the atmosphere. The calm disappears. The figure stops pretending to be harmless, and Gemma realizes that the entity was never trying to attack her physically. It was trying to make her choose to stay. That is a much more frightening idea. The further does not always need to force someone into a trap. Sometimes it can create a situation where the victim willingly walks into it. Gemma understands that she has to leave before the illusion becomes stronger. She turns away and begins searching for the path back, but the environment around her starts changing. The hallway she entered through is no longer where she remembers it being. Doors appear where there were no doors before. Familiar rooms seem to stretch endlessly, and every direction begins to look exactly the same. For the first time, Gemma realizes that she may be lost. And being lost in the further is completely different from being lost in the real world. There is no reliable map. There is no phone. There is no ordinary sense of distance. Even time feels different. A few minutes inside the further could feel like hours, while hours in the real world may pass without Gemma realizing it. That means every second she spends searching for a way out could be making the situation worse. But she cannot leave yet. She came here looking for an answer. And somewhere in this darkness is the truth about her connection to the further. As she moves deeper into the realm, Gemma begins seeing fragments of memories. Some belong to her, while others appear to belong to people she has never met. She sees moments of fear, grief, and desperation. People reaching for loved ones, people calling for help, people opening doors they should have left closed. At first, Gemma thinks these memories are random. Then, she realizes they are connected. The further is showing her what happens to people who become too deeply connected to it. Some entered because they wanted answers, some entered because they wanted to save someone, and some entered because they believed they could control what was waiting on the other side. None of them understood the price. Gemma begins to realize that her story may be following the same path. The difference is that she now knows what she is dealing with. That knowledge gives her a chance, but it also means she has to make a decision before the entities make it for her. Back in the real world, the people close to Gemma begin noticing that something is wrong. She has been gone longer than expected, and the atmosphere inside the house has changed. Strange sounds begin coming from rooms that should be empty. Objects move without explanation. Lights flicker even when there is no obvious electrical problem. At first, everyone tries to remain calm. Then, someone hears a voice. It sounds like Gemma. They follow it, but Gemma is not there. That is when they realize the danger may have already crossed the boundary. The voice continues calling from somewhere inside the house, repeating words that only Gemma would know. This is exactly the kind of situation where fear begins spreading through the family. Nobody knows whether the voice is actually Gemma or something pretending to be her, and that uncertainty creates another problem. If Gemma is trapped inside the further, who is calling them from the house? The answer may be the entity that has been following her. The people in the house have to decide whether they should search for Gemma or stay together and protect themselves. Both choices carry risks. Searching could lead them directly toward the entity, while staying safe could mean abandoning Gemma. Meanwhile, Gemma continues deeper into the further. Eventually, she reaches a place that looks different from everything else. It is quieter. There are no strange voices. No distorted rooms. No figures hiding in the darkness. For the first time since entering, Gemma feels almost safe, but she knows better now. In the further, silence can be a warning. She moves slowly through the room and notices something on the wall. It looks like an ordinary photograph at first, but when she gets closer, she realizes that the people in the picture are connected to the supernatural events she has been experiencing. One of them looks familiar, not because Gemma has met them before, but because she has seen their face somewhere else. In one of the memories. In one of the visions, the realization makes her heart sink. There may have been people connected to the further long before she ever discovered her ability. And if that is true, then her connection may not be an accident. Gemma begins wondering whether someone else had the same ability before her. If they did, what happened to them? She touches the photograph. And immediately, another vision begins. She sees a person standing in a dark room. The person appears frightened, but they are not alone. Something is standing behind them. The figure turns, the vision ends. Gemma pulls her hand away from the photograph. Breathing heavily, now she understands that the entities have been hiding something from her. Her ability may have existed before she was even aware of it. Someone else may have discovered the same doorway, and that person may have learned something about the further that Gemma now needs to know. The problem is that the answer may come with another terrible truth. Perhaps Gemma was never chosen randomly. Perhaps the connection was passed down. Perhaps the further has been waiting for another person who could open the door. And if that is true, then Gemma is not the beginning of this story. She may simply be the latest person caught inside it. Back in the real world, Elise begins putting the pieces together. She understands that Gemma's disappearance and the strange activity in the house are not separate events. They are connected through the same supernatural doorway. But Elise also knows something that makes the situation even more dangerous. If Gemma is still inside the further, bringing her back may not be as simple as finding her, because the longer someone remains there, the stronger the connection becomes. And if the connection becomes strong enough, the person may stop knowing which world they truly belong to. That is the danger Gemma is now facing. She has to find her way back before the further changes her permanently. But just as she begins searching for the exit, she hears a familiar voice behind her. This time, she recognizes it immediately. It is Elise. Gemma turns around. Elise is standing several feet away. For a moment, Gemma feels relief. But then she remembers something Elise once warned her about. In the further, familiar faces cannot always be trusted. Gemma stays where she is. The figure smiles. And slowly, the smile becomes something that no human face should be able to make. Gemma finally understands. Whatever is standing in front of her is not Elise. It is something that has learned how to use Elise's face, and now it knows exactly what Gemma is afraid of. The question is no longer whether Gemma can escape. The question is whether she can recognize the real exit before the entity convinces her to walk into the wrong one. Gemma does not move. She keeps her eyes fixed on the figure standing in front of her, trying to understand what she is looking at. The face may belong to Elise, but everything else feels wrong. The expression is too still, the silence is too unnatural, and there is something in the figure's eyes that Gemma has never seen in the real Elise. She knows this is another trap. The figure takes another step forward and speaks in Elise's voice, telling Gemma that she has to leave immediately. It sounds convincing enough that, for a moment, Gemma almost believes it, but then she remembers something important. The real Elise would never tell her to run blindly through the further. She would tell her to think, to stay calm, and most importantly, to question what she sees. Gemma takes another step backward. The figure stops. Then its expression changes. The friendly face disappears, and what replaces it is something far more disturbing. The features seem to shift for only a second, almost like the face itself cannot decide what it wants to look like. Gemma realizes that the entity is not simply copying Elise's appearance. It is studying the people around her and using their identities as weapons. That means the entity has access to her memories. And if it can use the people she trusts, Gemma has to be careful about every voice she hears from this point forward. She turns away and begins walking in the opposite direction. Behind her, the figure starts calling her name. It uses the voice of someone she loves. Gemma stops for a moment, but she refuses to turn around. The voice becomes more desperate. It tells her that someone needs her. It tells her that she is leaving them behind. It tells her that if she keeps walking, she will lose them forever. Every word is designed to break her concentration. Gemma knows that is exactly what the entity wants. So she keeps moving. The hallway becomes darker with every step, but eventually she notices something strange. A faint light is coming from somewhere ahead. It is not the cold, unnatural light she has seen throughout the further. It looks warmer, almost like sunlight coming through a window. Gemma follows it. The closer she gets, the more familiar the surroundings become. For the first time, she sees her own home, not a distorted version, not a memory. It looks completely normal. She sees the furniture exactly where it should be. She sees the hallway she knows. She hears familiar sounds coming from another room. Gemma almost believes she has finally found the way back. But then she notices one detail. There is no reflection in the mirror. She looks at herself, but the glass remains empty. That tells her everything. She is still inside the further. The house is another illusion. And this time the entity has created something much more dangerous because it is not trying to frighten. Her dotted is trying to make her comfortable. Gemma walks through the fake house carefully, refusing to trust anything she sees. She hears footsteps upstairs. She hears a door close. She hears someone calling her name, but she does not answer. Then she hears a child's voice. That changes everything. Gemma freezes. The voice sounds frightened. It calls for her. She knows that voice. Her instincts immediately tell her to run upstairs, but the logical part of her mind tells her to stop. The entity has already learned how to manipulate her emotions, and it knows exactly which voice will make her forget the danger. She closes her eyes. She listens. The voice calls again, but this time, Gemma notices something. The voice is repeating the same sentence, the exact same sentence, again and again. That is not how a real person would speak. The illusion is breaking. Gemma opens her eyes and sees the house changing around her. The walls begin to stretch, the furniture disappears, and the warm lighting fades into darkness. The false home collapses, and behind it is the real further. The realization gives Gemma something she desperately needs. Confidence. She finally understands that the further can manipulate what she sees, but it cannot completely control what she knows. Her memories are being used against her, but her ability to recognize patterns is becoming stronger. That may be the key to surviving. Gemma begins looking for signs that do not belong. Instead of trusting what feels familiar, she searches for what feels impossible. And eventually, she finds it. A doorway standing alone in the darkness. There is no wall around it. No room. No hallway. Just a single door. Gemma approaches it slowly. She already knows what it means. A doorway has always been one of the strongest symbols in the Insidious universe. It represents the boundary between one place and another, between the living and the dead, between safety and danger. But this door feels different. It does not seem to lead deeper into the further. It feels like it leads out. Gemma reaches toward the handle. Before she touches it, she hears a voice behind her. This time, it does not pretend to be Elise. It does not pretend to be someone she loves. The voice belongs to the entity itself. It tells Gemma that if she opens the door, she will bring something with her. Gemma stops. The entity explains that the door is not an exit. It is a passage, and if Gemma crosses it, the connection between the two worlds will become permanent. For the first time, Gemma understands the real danger. She was never being hunted, simply because the entity wanted to hurt her. It wanted her to open the door. The entire journey may have been designed to push her toward this exact moment. The visions, the fake versions of people she loves. The false house. The memories. Everything was leading her here. Gemma slowly turns around. The entity is standing in the darkness. It is no longer hiding behind another person's face. Now she can finally see something closer to its true form. It is difficult to describe because it does not look completely human. Its body seems almost distorted by the darkness around it, as if the creature belongs to the shadows themselves. But the most disturbing thing is its expression. It is smiling because it believes. Gemma has no other choice. Gemma looks at the door again. She knows she cannot stay in the further forever, but she also knows that opening the wrong door could allow the entity to follow her into the real world. So she does something the entity does not expect. She steps away from the door. The entity stops smiling. Gemma tells it that if the door is truly the only way out, then she would rather remain trapped than open it. For the first time, the entity looks uncertain. That reaction tells Gemma something important. Maybe it does not control the door. Maybe it needs her. Maybe the entire reason it has been manipulating her is because it cannot cross the boundary without her permission. And if that is true, then Gemma finally has something the entity does not have: a choice. She may not know how to defeat it yet, but she now understands how to deny it. The entity moves closer. Gemma refuses to move. The darkness around them begins shaking, as if the further itself is reacting to their confrontation. Then another sound reaches Gemma from somewhere far away. A voice. A real voice, this time. It sounds different from the illusions. It is weak. It is distant. But Gemma recognizes it. Elise is calling her from the other side. Somehow, Elise has found a way to reach her. Gemma realizes that the real world may still have a connection to her. She closes her eyes and focuses on that voice. The entity tries to interrupt. It shows her memories. It shows her family. It shows her every fear she has ever had. But Gemma refuses to look. She focuses only on the voice. The connection becomes Stronger, the doorway begins to shake. And for the first time, Gemma realizes that perhaps she does not need to open the door herself. Maybe someone on the other side can open it for her. The question is whether Elise can reach her before the entity realizes what is happening. Because if the entity understands that Gemma has found another way out, it may stop trying to manipulate her. And start trying to destroy the connection completely. The moment Gemma hears Elise's voice, everything around her seems to change. The further is still dark, still unpredictable, but now there is something she did not have before, a connection to the outside world. It is faint, almost impossible to hold on to, yet it is real. For the first time since entering this place, Gemma knows that someone is actively trying to bring her back, but the entity realizes it too. The darkness around Gemma begins moving faster. The walls seem to breathe, the shadows stretch across the floor, and the distant voice of Elise becomes harder to hear. The entity understands that if Gemma can reconnect with the real world, its control over her may disappear. So it changes its strategy. Instead of trying to frighten Gemma, it tries to confuse her. Suddenly, several voices begin calling her name. Some sound like Elise, others sound like members of her family. One voice even sounds exactly like Gemma herself. Every direction seems to contain someone asking her to follow. Gemma closes her eyes. She knows she cannot trust what she hears anymore. She focuses on the one thing the entity cannot easily copy, the feeling behind Elise's voice. There is fear in it, but there is also urgency. Elise is not trying to lure her somewhere. She is trying to warn her. Gemma listens carefully. Then she hears 3 words. Do not open it. Her eyes immediately open. The door. Elise knows about the doorway. Somehow, she has realized that the door is not an escape route. It is the trap. The entity becomes visibly more aggressive. It rushes toward Gemma, and she finally runs. The darkness behind her seems to move with her. She does not look back because she knows that if she turns around, the entity may use another illusion against her. She follows Elise's voice instead. Left. Then straight. Then toward the sound. The directions are simple, but the further refuses to remain stable. A hallway suddenly becomes a staircase. The staircase becomes a narrow corridor. The corridor opens into a room filled with photographs. Gemma stops. The photographs cover the walls. They show people, families, children, men and women who appear to have experienced the same strange connection that Gemma is dealing with. Some of the pictures are old. Some look much newer. And in several of them, there is the same symbol, a dark shape drawn near the edge of the photograph. Gemma recognizes it. It is the same mark she saw earlier, the same mark connected to the doorway. Now she understands that this is not the first time someone has been used as a bridge between the two worlds. There were others, people who had the ability to sense the further, people who may have been able to enter it, and perhaps people who were never able to return. Gemma looks more closely at one of the photographs. There is a young woman standing with her family. At first, nothing seems unusual. Then Gemma notices the reflection in the window behind them. Everyone in the photograph has a reflection except the woman. Gemma realizes that the photograph may have been taken after the woman was already connected to the further. She begins to understand how the process works. The connection does not happen all at once. It grows. First, the person sees things. Then they hear things. Then they begin entering the further. And eventually, something from the further begins recognizing them. That is what happened to the people in these photographs. And it may be what is happening to Gemma now. The entity appears again at the end of the room. But this time, it does not move toward her. It simply watches. Gemma realizes why. It knows she has discovered the history of the connection. And it knows that if she understands the pattern, she may also discover how to break it. Gemma asks the entity what it wants. For several seconds, there is no answer. Then it speaks. It tells her that it does not want to hurt her. It wants her to open the way. Gemma asks why. The entity says that the further is not where it belongs. It claims that it was trapped there. It claims that the living world is the place it was meant to exist. Gemma does not believe it. But the entity continues. It tells her that the people in the photographs were not victims. They were doors. And Gemma is the next one. That statement changes the way she sees everything. The entity is not simply trying to escape. It has been searching for someone capable of creating a permanent connection. Someone who can exist between both worlds. Someone who can open the door and keep it open. Gemma realizes that her ability may be much more powerful than she thought. She is not simply able to visit the further. she may be able to connect the further to the real world permanently. That is why the entity needs her. And that is why it has been manipulating her emotions. Fear alone was not enough. It needed her to choose the door willingly. Gemma steps closer to the photographs. She asks what happened to the other people. The entity remains silent. Gemma already knows the answer. They did not survive. Or perhaps something worse happened. Maybe they returned, but they were no longer completely themselves. The thought terrifies her, because if the connection continues growing inside her, she could eventually become the same thing. Elise's voice reaches her again. This time, it is much clearer. She tells Gemma to find the photograph with the broken frame. Gemma looks around. There are dozens of photographs. She starts searching. The entity tries to stop her. It moves closer. Gemma runs along the wall, looking for the broken frame. Then she sees it. A photograph hanging crookedly near the corner of the room. The frame is cracked. She pulls it down. Behind the photograph is a small opening in the wall. Inside is something that looks like a key. Not a normal key. It is dark, old, and covered in strange markings. Gemma reaches for it. The entity suddenly screams. The sound shakes the entire room. That reaction tells Gemma she has found something important. She grabs the key. The moment her hand closes around it, the room changes. The photographs fall from the walls. The darkness disappears for a second, and Gemma sees something she has never seen before. A path, not a doorway, not an illusion. A real path leading toward the world of the living. Elise's voice becomes stronger. She tells Gemma that the key is not meant to open the door. It is meant to close it. Gemma looks at the entity. For the first time, it looks afraid. That tells her everything. The entity has spent all this time pretending to control the situation, but it has been afraid of one thing. This key. The question is where the key belongs. Gemma looks toward the path. At the far end, she can see a faint outline of the real world. She can almost hear her family. Almost feel the air. Almost touch home. But before she can move, the entity launches itself toward her. Gemma raises the key. The darkness crashes into her. And everything goes black. Asterisk. For a few seconds, there is nothing. No voices, no footsteps, no movement, just complete darkness. Gemma cannot tell whether she is still standing in the further or whether the connection has already pulled her somewhere else. She tries to move, but her body feels strangely heavy, almost as if the darkness itself is holding her in place. Then she hears breathing. It is not hers. Someone is standing nearby. Gemma opens her eyes slowly, but at first she cannot see anything. She grips the strange key tightly and waits. The breathing becomes louder, and then a shadow begins to form in front of her. She expects the entity. Instead, she sees a person, a woman. She looks frightened, exhausted, and completely out of place in the further. Gemma recognizes her from one of the photographs. The woman from the broken frame. For a moment, neither of them speaks. Then the woman tells Gemma that she has been waiting for someone like her. Gemma asks how long she has been trapped there. The woman does not answer directly. She simply says that time does not work the same way in the further. She could have been there for days, or years. Or perhaps much longer. That realization makes Gemma understand just how dangerous this place really is. The people trapped here are not simply waiting in a dark room. They are slowly losing their connection to the world they came from. The woman tells Gemma that she once had the same ability. She could see the further. She could enter it. And, like Gemma, she believed that her ability could help her save someone she loved. That was how the entity found her. Gemma asks whether the entity was the reason she became trapped. The woman nods. But then she says something that Gemma was not expecting. The entity did not create the connection. It only discovered how to use it. That means the doorway existed before the entity found a way to exploit it. The woman explains that people like Gemma have always been able to cross the boundary between worlds. Most never realize it. Some experience strange dreams, unexplained visions, or moments where they feel as if they are somewhere else. Only a few develop enough control to enter the further consciously. Those people become extremely valuable to entities that cannot cross the boundary on their own. Gemma finally understands why the entity has been so desperate to control her. But the woman warns her that the key will not solve everything. It can close the connection, but only if Gemma uses it in the right place. Gemma looks down at the key. She asks where that place is. The woman points toward the darkness behind them. There is a structure hidden in the distance. It looks like a doorway surrounded by black smoke. Gemma immediately recognizes that it is the same doorway she saw earlier. But now she understands that it is not simply an entrance. It is the center of the connection. If she can reach it and use the key, she may be able to close the path between the further and the real world. But there is one problem. The entity is still coming. The woman tells Gemma that the entity will do everything possible to stop her. Gemma asks what will happen if it catches them. The woman looks at her and says that Gemma will not remember the way back. That sentence sends a chill through her. Because losing the path home may be worse than dying. If Gemma forgets why she entered the further, she could remain there forever. She could become another lost soul. Another face in another photograph. Another person waiting for someone else to come through the darkness. Gemma refuses to let that happen. She asks the woman to come with her. The woman shakes her head. She says she has been trapped for too long. The connection has already changed her. She cannot cross the boundary anymore. But Gemma still can. That makes the decision even harder. Gemma wants to help her, but the woman tells her that if Gemma stays, both of them will be lost. She tells Gemma to go. Gemma turns toward the distant doorway. Then she starts running. The further seems to react immediately. The ground beneath her feet shifts. The walls begin moving. The darkness closes in from both sides. Behind her, the woman remains standing in the distance. She watches Gemma disappear into the darkness. Then the entity arrives. It sees the woman. For a moment, they stare at each other. The woman does not run. She knows what is about to happen. She turns toward the direction where Gemma disappeared and whispers one final warning. Then the darkness covers her. Gemma keeps running. She can hear the entity behind her, but she refuses to look back. The structure ahead becomes clearer. It is much larger than she first thought. The doorway is surrounded by strange shapes, almost like roots growing through the walls. The closer she gets, the stronger the connection to the real world becomes. She can hear voices. She can hear movement. And then she hears someone crying. It is her family. They are calling for her. Gemma reaches the doorway. The key in her hand begins to heat up. She places it against the center of the frame. Nothing happens. She tries again. Still nothing. Then she realizes what is missing. The key is not enough. She needs to understand what she is closing. The connection is not simply a door. It is a bond between two worlds. And that bond has been strengthened by every person who entered the further. Every fear, every memory, every person who tried to bring someone back. All of it has become part of the connection. Gemma realizes that she cannot simply lock the door from the outside. She has to break the bond itself. That means she has to let go of the thing that brought her into the further in the first place. Her desire to save everyone. Her fear of losing the people she loves. Her belief that she can control the supernatural world if she understands it well enough. She has to accept that some things cannot be saved. The realization hurts, but it also gives her strength. Gemma closes her eyes. She thinks about her family. She thinks about everything she has been fighting for. Then she releases the fear that brought her here. The key suddenly begins glowing. The doorway shakes. The darkness around it starts collapsing. For a moment, Gemma thinks she has succeeded. Then she hears a voice behind her. The entity has arrived. It tells her to stop. Gemma keeps her eyes closed. The entity moves closer. It begins showing her visions of her family. It shows her terrible things. It shows her losing them. It tells her that if she closes the doorway, she will never see them again. Gemma's hands begin shaking. For one brief moment, she almost believes it. Then she hears Elise. Not from the distance, not from a memory. Right beside her. Elise tells her that fear is exactly what the entity needs. Gemma opens her eyes. She understands. The entity cannot force the door open. It needs her fear. It needs her choice. So Gemma makes the only choice she can. She turns the key. The entire doorway erupts with darkness. The entity screams. The further begins collapsing around them. And somewhere in the real world, every light inside Gemma's house suddenly goes out. For a few seconds, nobody knows what is happening. Then the lights come back, and Gemma's body suddenly falls to the floor. She is back, but Elise immediately notices something strange. Gemma is alive. She is breathing. Her eyes are open, yet she is not speaking. Elise kneels beside her and asks whether she can hear her. Gemma slowly looks up. For a moment, everything seems normal. Then she whispers something that makes Elise's expression change completely. She says, "I don't think it came back alone." And, behind them, somewhere in the dark hallway, a door slowly begins to open. The door at the end of the hallway moves only a few inches, but everyone in the room notices it. Nobody touches it. Nobody is standing near it. Yet it continues opening slowly, as if someone on the other side is carefully pulling it toward them. Elise immediately tells everyone not to move. Gemma is still on the floor, trying to catch her breath. She looks toward the doorway and immediately understands what is happening. The connection was closed, but something may have crossed over before it disappeared. For a few seconds, nothing comes through. Then the door stops. Elise walks toward it carefully. She does not open it. Instead, she watches the gap beneath the door. There is a shadow on the floor, but the shadow is moving in the wrong direction. Elise steps back. She knows this is not a normal shadow. Something is standing on the other side. Gemma tries to warn her, but her voice is weak. She tells Elise that the entity cannot be allowed to see her directly. Elise looks confused. Gemma explains that inside the entity was able to manipulate what she saw because it had access to her memories. But in the real world, it may not have the same control. That means they still have a chance. The door suddenly swings open. Nothing is there. The hallway is empty. Everyone remains silent. Then a small sound comes from the room. A soft tapping. 3 taps. Puzz. 3 more. Gemma recognizes it immediately. It is the same sound she heard before entering the further. The entity is not gone. It is hiding. Elise tells everyone to stay together. They move slowly through the house, checking each room one by one. The atmosphere feels completely different now. Before, the house was simply the place where the supernatural events happened. Now it feels like the supernatural has become part of the house itself. Every room contains the possibility of something being there. Every reflection becomes suspicious. Every dark corner feels occupied. Gemma notices something strange when they pass a mirror. Her reflection appears a second later than she does. She stops. Everyone else keeps walking. Gemma raises her hand. The reflection raises its hand after her. She lowers her hand. The reflection does not. Instead, it smiles. Gemma immediately turns away. She does not tell the others what she saw because she knows panic could make the situation worse. But Elise notices her expression. She asks what happened. Gemma tells her. Elise looks toward the mirror. The reflection is normal again. That makes the situation even more disturbing, because now they cannot tell whether Gemma is seeing something real or whether the entity is still manipulating her perception. Elise asks Gemma a simple question. What did she see inside the further before she returned? Gemma tells her everything. The photographs, the trapped woman, the doorway, the key, and the entity's claim that people like Gemma have existed before. Elise becomes quiet. She realizes that there may be an older history behind Gemma's ability. She has encountered people with unusual connections to the further before, but she never understood how those connections were created. Now she may finally have an explanation. The ability itself may not be the danger. The danger comes from what happens when an entity discovers someone who can use it. Elise tells Gemma that the people in the photographs may have been part of an older pattern. Some were probably never able to return. Others may have returned without realizing that something had followed them. Gemma asks how they can know whether the entity actually crossed over. Elise does not have an answer. Then something falls from upstairs. Everyone looks up. A photograph lands on the floor. Gemma walks toward it. She picks it up. It is one of the photographs she saw inside the further. The same woman from the broken frame is standing in it. But now there is something different. Someone else is standing behind her. The entity. Gemma drops the photograph. Elise picks it up and studies it. She immediately realizes the problem. If the photograph is now in the real world, then the connection between the two worlds may not have been completely destroyed. Something may still be attached to Gemma. The house becomes silent again. Then Gemma hears a voice. This time, it comes from behind her. It sounds exactly like her own voice. It says her name. Gemma turns around. Nobody's there. She looks at Elise. Elise tells her not to answer. The voice comes again. It says something only Gemma would know. A private memory from her childhood. Gemma's face changes. The entity is still connected to her mind. It may not need a doorway anymore. It may have found another way in. Gemma begins to panic. Elise tells her to focus on the room around her. The floor, the walls, the sound of everyone's breathing. She tells Gemma to identify 5 things she can see. Then 4 things she can touch. Then 3 things she can hear. It helps bring her back to the present. For a moment, the voice disappears. But Elise knows this is not a permanent solution. The entity is testing the connection. It wants to know how much access it still has. And if Gemma continues hearing it, the connection could become stronger. That means they need to find out exactly what happened when Gemma used the key. They need to know whether the doorway truly closed. Elise asks Gemma to describe the final moment again. Gemma remembers the darkness collapsing. She remembers the entity screaming. She remembers the doorway closing. But then she remembers something else. Just before she returned, she saw a second figure standing behind the entity. She never understood who it was. Elise immediately asks her to describe it. Gemma says the figure was completely silent. It did not attack. It simply watched. And then, just before the connection closed, it looked directly at her. Elise's expression becomes serious. She tells Gemma that may be the real problem. The entity they encountered may not have been the strongest presence in the further. It may have been working for something else. Something older. Something that was never trying to escape through the doorway. It may have been trying to use the doorway to bring something much worse through. The idea changes everything. Gemma thought she had been fighting one entity, but perhaps the entity was only the first layer of the threat. Elise asks her one final question. What did the second figure look like? Gemma hesitates. Then she says it looked like a person. An ordinary person. Elise asks whether Gemma recognized the face. Gemma shakes her head. She says she had never seen that face before, but then she remembers something. The face looked exactly like the woman from the photograph. The woman who was supposed to be trapped inside the further. Elise slowly looks at the photograph in her hand. The woman in the picture is smiling. Then, right in front of them, the photograph changes. The woman's eyes move. Everyone freezes. The woman looks directly out of the photograph. And whispers a single word. Gemma. The lights go out again. This time, nobody screams. They simply listen, because somewhere inside the darkness, footsteps begin moving through the house. Slowly. One step at a time, coming closer, and Gemma realizes that whatever came back from the further may not have crossed through the door at all. It may have come back through her. The footsteps stop. For several seconds, the entire house is completely silent. Gemma can hear her own breathing, Elise moving somewhere nearby, and the quiet movement of the people standing behind them. But the footsteps that were getting closer have suddenly disappeared. Nobody knows whether that is a good sign. Gemma slowly turns her head toward the hallway. There is nothing there. The darkness looks completely normal, and somehow, that makes it worse. Elise tells everyone to remain where they are. She does not want anyone wandering through the house while the connection is still unstable. Whatever is happening, it seems to be reacting to Gemma's presence. Then Gemma feels something cold against the back of her hand. She looks down. The strange key is still there. She thought it had disappeared when the doorway collapsed inside the further, but somehow it came back with her. That immediately makes Elise nervous. She tells Gemma not to touch it. But before Gemma can put it down, the key begins moving on its own. It slowly turns in her palm. Not toward the hallway. Not toward a door. It points directly at Gemma. She looks at Elise, confused. Elise tells her that the key may no longer be connected to a physical doorway. It may now be connected to whatever remains inside Gemma after her journey through the further. That possibility terrifies Gemma. She asks whether the entity could still be inside her. Elise says she does not know, and that is probably the most frightening answer she could give. Elise has dealt with supernatural situations for years. She has seen possessions, hauntings, spirits, and people trapped between worlds. But this situation is different because Gemma returned with something that does not seem to have a physical form. It may be hiding inside her memories. It may be attached to her ability, or it may simply be using her as a bridge. Until they understand which one is true, nobody can know how dangerous the situation really is. Gemma suddenly hears the woman's voice again. This time, the voice is not coming from another room. It is coming from inside her head. The woman tells her not to trust Elise. Gemma freezes. Elise immediately notices. She asks what Gemma heard. Gemma hesitates before telling her. Elise does not become angry. Instead, she calmly tells Gemma that the entity may be trying to create doubt between them. That is exactly what it wants. If Gemma stops trusting Elise, she will become easier to manipulate. The voice returns. It tells Gemma that Elise is hiding something. Gemma looks at Elise. For a moment, she wonders whether it could be true. After all, Elise knows more about the further than she has explained. There are clearly things she has not told Gemma. The voice continues. It tells Gemma that Elise knew about the people in the photographs. Gemma asks Elise directly, did she know? Elise does not answer immediately. That silence is enough. Gemma realizes that there is more to the story. Elise finally admits that she has seen references to people with abilities similar to Gemma's before, but she never understood how those abilities were connected. She also admits that she once encountered a case involving a family whose daughter could enter the further without falling asleep. The case ended badly. The girl disappeared. Her family believed she had died, but Elise never found a body. Gemma asks whether the girl could still be inside the further. Elise says it is possible. Then Gemma asks the question that has been bothering her since she saw the photograph. Was the woman she met inside the further that same girl? Elise does not know, but there is one way to find out. The photograph. Elise places it on the table. She studies every detail carefully. The picture looks old, but the woman standing inside it looks exactly the same as the person Gemma encountered. That should be impossible. If the photograph was taken years ago, the woman should have aged, but she has not. Elise realizes that the photograph may not be showing a normal moment in time. It may be showing a connection. The woman is not trapped in the photograph. The photograph is simply connected to her. That means the same thing may have happened to Gemma. Her image could eventually become part of the further if the connection is not broken. Gemma looks at her hands. For a second, they appear normal. Then she notices something strange. The skin around her fingertips looks darker, almost like smoke is moving underneath it. She immediately pulls her hand away. Elise tells her to stay calm, but Gemma knows this is not an illusion. Something is changing. The entity is getting closer. And then the lights come back on. Everyone looks toward the hallway. The door is open, but now there is someone standing inside the doorway. It is the woman from the photograph. Gemma recognizes her immediately. She looks exactly the way she did inside the further, but now she is standing in the real world. The woman does not attack. She simply looks at Gemma. Then she says that she has been trying to warn her. Elise steps between them. She asks the woman what she wants. The woman looks at Elise and says that the thing following Gemma is not the entity they thought it was. It is something that has been hiding behind it. Something that cannot enter the world by itself. Something that needs a person with Gemma's ability. Gemma asks why it wants her. The woman says because Gemma is different. She is not simply able to enter the further. She can bring people back. And that ability could change everything. Elise asks how the woman escaped. The woman looks down. She says she did not escape. She was allowed to leave. That answer makes the room completely silent. Gemma asks what that means. The woman explains that the further sometimes releases people when it no longer needs them. But when it releases someone, it leaves something behind. A piece of itself. A memory. A fear. A presence. The woman looks directly at Gemma. She tells her that the thing inside Gemma is not the entity that chased her. It is something much older. Something that was already inside the further long before any of them entered it. Gemma asks how to remove it. The woman says there may be only one way. Gemma must return. Elise immediately refuses. She tells Gemma that going back is exactly what the entity wants. But the woman insists that the doorway they closed was only one entrance. There are others, and the connection inside Gemma has become one of them. If they do nothing, the boundary between the worlds will continue weakening. The supernatural presence will become stronger. Eventually, people may begin seeing the further without even realizing they are looking at it. The house begins changing again. The hallway becomes darker. The walls seem to stretch. The woman suddenly looks frightened. She tells Gemma that it has found them. Everyone turns toward the doorway. There is nobody there. Then the woman's expression changes. She looks directly behind Gemma. Gemma slowly turns. Nothing. She looks back. The woman is gone. Only the photograph remains on the table. But now there is something different in the picture. Gemma is standing inside it. Not the real Gemma. A version of her. And that version is smiling. Elise picks up the photograph. Her hands begin shaking. She tells Gemma that the connection is no longer waiting for her to return to the further. It has already started pulling her back. Gemma suddenly feels dizzy. The room around her becomes distant. The voices fade. The walls disappear. For a moment, she sees the familiar darkness again. The further. But this time, she is not standing there. She is looking at it from inside the real world. She can see the boundary. She can see the shadows moving behind it. And then she sees the same figure that was standing behind the entity. The figure looks directly at her. It raises one hand. And on the other side of the boundary, something answers. A second hand appears. Then a third. Then dozens of hands begin pressing against the invisible wall separating the two worlds. Gemma realizes what is happening. The further is not trying to bring one entity into the real world anymore. It is trying to open the entire boundary. And if Gemma is the bridge, then stopping one creature will not be enough. She may have to close the connection from inside, which means she may have to go back into the further one final time. But this time, there may be no guarantee that she can return. Gemma slowly comes back to herself, but the room around her no longer feels completely real. She can hear Elise speaking, yet the voice seems distant, as if Gemma is standing underwater. The walls appear to move slightly whenever she looks away, and the shadows in the corners seem deeper than they should be. Elise notices immediately that something is wrong. She tells Gemma to focus on her voice. Gemma tries. For a moment, it works. Then she looks at the photograph again. The version of herself inside the picture is still there. And now it is no longer smiling. It is staring directly at her with a completely blank expression. Gemma realizes that the photograph is showing her future if she fails to break the connection. She asks Elise whether destroying the photograph will help. Elise says it might make things worse. The photograph is not the source of the connection. It is only a reflection of it. Destroying it would be like breaking a mirror while the person standing in front of it is still there. The connection would remain. Gemma asks what they can do. Elise finally explains the part she has been afraid to say. There may be a way to enter the further without using Gemma's ability, but it requires someone on the outside to guide the person back, and there is a serious risk. If the connection closes while someone is still inside, they may never return. Gemma understands what that means immediately. Someone has to go with her. Elise does not hesitate. She says she will go. Gemma refuses. She knows what the further has already done to Elise in the past, and she does not want to put her through it again. But Elise tells her that this is exactly why she has to go. She understands the further. She knows how it manipulates people. And more importantly, she knows that Gemma cannot fight it alone. The two of them begin preparing for the journey. There is no dramatic ritual, no simple spell. Instead, Elise focuses on creating a stable connection between the real world and the further. The goal is to make a path that can be followed in both directions. Gemma lies down. Elise tells her that once she enters, she must remember one thing. She must never follow a voice simply because it sounds familiar. Gemma asks what she should follow. Elise tells her to follow the memory of home. Not a person, not a voice, not a face, a feeling. The feeling of being safe, because the further can copy appearances, but it cannot perfectly reproduce what home means to someone. Gemma closes her eyes. The room becomes quiet. Her breathing slows, and then everything disappears. When Gemma opens her eyes, she is standing in the further again, but this time it is different. She does not arrive in darkness. She arrives in a place that looks almost peaceful. There is a long road stretching ahead of her. The sky is completely black. There are no stars. No moon. Just darkness. Gemma takes a few steps forward. She hears Elise behind her. Elise has made it through. For a moment, Gemma feels relieved, but Elise immediately tells her that something is wrong. The further is too quiet. They both know that silence usually means something is watching. They continue walking. After a while, they reach a house. Gemma recognizes it. It is her childhood home. She has not seen it in years. The sight immediately brings back memories she had forgotten. Elise tells her not to go inside. Gemma says she needs to see something. She walks toward the front door. The door opens by itself. Inside, everything looks exactly as she remembers. The furniture, the pictures, the smell of the room, even the sound of an old clock. For a moment, Gemma forgets where she is. Then she sees herself as a child. A young version of Gemma is sitting on the floor. She is drawing something. Gemma watches from the doorway. The child suddenly looks up. She sees the adult Gemma, and she smiles. Elise tells Gemma not to approach, but Gemma cannot look away. The child says something that makes Gemma freeze. She says, "You promised you would come back." Gemma does not remember making that promise. The child continues drawing. Then she turns the paper around. On it is a picture of the further. And beside it is a dark figure. Gemma asks how she could have known about the further as a child. Elise has no answer. The child looks at Gemma and says that the dark figure has been waiting for her. Gemma realizes that her connection to the further may have started much earlier than she thought. Maybe she did not discover it as an adult. Maybe she experienced it as a child and simply forgot. The entity may have been connected to her family for years. That possibility changes everything. Gemma asks her younger self who the dark figure is. The child points toward the hallway. Gemma looks. There is nothing there. Then the child whispers that the figure lives behind the door. The same door. The one Gemma has seen again and again. The door from the further. The door from the photograph. The door she was warned never to open. Gemma slowly walks toward it. Elise tells her to stop. But before Gemma can reach it, the door opens. Behind it is not another room. It is the further. Gemma looks back at the child. The child is gone. Now the house is empty. Elise realizes that this is not a memory. It is an invitation. The entity has created the house because it knows Gemma's childhood memories are one of the few places where her defenses are weak. Gemma asks why it keeps showing her the door. Elise says because the entity cannot create the connection by itself. It needs Gemma to open it. Again. Gemma looks at the doorway. This time, she understands the trap, but she also understands something else. The door may not be the enemy. The entity wants her to believe that the door itself is dangerous, but perhaps the real danger is what is controlling it. Gemma steps closer. Elise follows. The darkness beyond the doorway begins moving. A figure appears. It is the same entity that chased Gemma before. But now it looks different. It is no longer hiding. It stands completely still. Then it speaks. It tells Gemma that she has finally remembered. Gemma asks what she is supposed to remember. The entity says she has been here before. Not once, not twice, many times. Every time Gemma dreamed about the further as a child, she was actually entering it. Every time she woke up frightened, she had returned. She had simply forgotten. But the entity remembered. It had been waiting for her to become strong enough to stay. Gemma realizes that the strange dreams from her childhood were never dreams. They were memories, and the darkest possibility suddenly becomes clear. If she has been entering the further for years, then the entity may have been influencing her life long before she knew it existed. It may have been watching her grow up. Waiting. Learning. And preparing for the day when she could finally open the door permanently. Elise tells Gemma they have to leave, but before they can move, the entity reveals something that changes the entire situation. It tells Gemma that it is not the one who chose her. Someone else did. The figure behind the entity steps forward. The darkness separates, and Gemma finally sees the face. It is the woman from the photograph, but this time, she is not afraid. She is smiling, and Elise immediately recognizes her. She whispers a name she has not spoken in years. The woman looks at Elise and says that they have been waiting for her too. The house disappears. The ground beneath Gemma and Elise collapses, and they fall together into a much deeper part of the further, a place neither of them has ever seen before. As they fall, Gemma hears the woman laughing. Then everything goes black. When Gemma opens her eyes again, she is lying on a cold floor surrounded by complete darkness. For a few seconds, she does not know where Elise is. She calls her name, but there is no answer. The silence feels heavier than before, almost as if this part of the further is completely disconnected from everything they have seen. Gemma slowly sits up and looks around. There are no houses, no hallways, and no familiar objects. The place feels empty, but she can sense something watching her. She reaches for the key, but it is gone. Then she hears footsteps. Gemma turns. Elise is standing several feet away. She looks shaken but alive. The two of them move toward each other, relieved that they have not been separated. But Elise immediately notices something strange. The darkness around them does not behave normally. It seems to move whenever they speak, almost as if the environment itself is listening. Gemma asks where they are. Elise says she has never been this deep inside the further. That answer tells Gemma how serious their situation has become. They were not simply pulled away from the doorway. They were dragged beyond it. A place like this may not even follow the same rules as the parts of the further they already know. Elise tells Gemma that they need to stay together and find a way back before whatever brought them here realizes they are awake. They begin walking. There is no clear direction, so they simply follow the faintest sound they can hear. It sounds like someone whispering. At first, the words are impossible to understand. Then they become clearer. The voice is repeating names of people. Some are familiar to Elise. Others mean nothing to Gemma. Elise suddenly stops. One of the names belongs to a person she knew years ago. Someone connected to one of her earliest investigations. Gemma asks who it is. Elise says the person disappeared while investigating a case involving a child who could enter the further. Gemma immediately understands. The cases may all be connected. The woman from the photograph was not an isolated incident. The people Gemma saw earlier may have been part of the same chain. For years, People with unusual connections to the further may have been drawn toward the same place, and something has been waiting for them. As they continue, they begin seeing doors, hundreds of them. They cover the walls around them, stretching into the darkness in every direction. Some are old, some are new, some are covered with scratches. Others look completely ordinary. Gemma realizes that each door may represent a person who entered the further. Elise tells her not to touch any of them. They keep walking. Then Gemma notices one particular door. It is smaller than the others. It looks like the door from her childhood home. She stops. Elise tells her to keep moving, but Gemma cannot. She has spent the entire story trying to understand why the further has been connected to her for so long. Now she may finally have the answer. She approaches the door. Before she can touch it, it opens. Inside is a bedroom. Gemma recognizes it immediately. It is her childhood bedroom. The same bed, the same curtains, the same small objects she remembers having when she was young. But there is one thing that does not belong. A photograph sits on the desk. Gemma walks toward it. She picks it up. It shows her as a child standing beside her family. Everyone is smiling, but in the background, there is a dark figure. Gemma realizes that she had seen that figure before. Not in the further. In her childhood memories. It had been there all along, watching from a distance. Gemma begins remembering things she had completely forgotten. A night when she woke up and saw someone standing near her bedroom door. A strange voice calling her name. A shadow moving across the ceiling. Her parents telling her it was only a nightmare, but it was never a nightmare. Gemma had entered the further as a child, and something had followed her back. Elise watches her carefully. She asks whether Gemma remembers what happened next. Gemma closes her eyes. The memory becomes clearer. She remembers being afraid. She remembers hiding under the blankets. And she remembers another person entering her room. The woman from the photograph, but she was not the woman she is now. She was younger. She looked frightened. She told Gemma not to look at the figure in the corner. Then she told her something that Gemma had forgotten completely. She said, "If it ever learns your name, never answer it." Gemma opens her eyes. She realizes the entity has known her name for years. Maybe that is why it was able to find her again. Maybe saying her name is not just a way to communicate. Maybe it creates a connection. Elise immediately understands. The voices calling Gemma throughout the story were not random. Every time Gemma answered, the entity became stronger. Every time she reacted to her name, she gave it another piece of herself. That means the entity may have been slowly building a bridge through her since childhood. Gemma asks whether it can be stopped. Elise says yes, but she does not know how yet. Then they hear a voice from outside the room. It is calling Gemma. This time, the voice sounds like her mother. Gemma immediately becomes emotional. She has not heard that voice in a long time. Elise tells her not to answer. The voice calls again. It says Gemma's name. Then it says something only her mother would know. Gemma starts crying. For a moment, she wants to open the door and run toward the voice, but she remembers the warning. Never answer it. She closes her eyes and remains silent. The voice changes. It becomes angry. Then another voice appears. Then another. The room fills with voices from Gemma's past. People she loved. People she lost. People she has not heard from in years. All of them are calling her. All of them are asking her to open the door. Gemma finally understands what the entity is doing. It is not trying to scare her. It is trying to make her choose. It wants her to believe that everyone she has ever loved is waiting behind that door. And if she opens it, she may willingly give the entity access to everything she has been protecting. Gemma refuses. She tells Elise they have to leave. They turn toward the doorway they entered through, but the doorway is gone. The bedroom has changed. The walls are now covered with photographs. Every photograph shows Gemma at a different age. A child, a teenager, a young woman, moments from her life. But in every picture, somewhere in the background, there is the same dark figure. Watching. Waiting. Gemma realizes that the entity has been following her for most of her life. And then she notices one final photograph. It is recent. It shows Gemma standing in her home. But she is not alone. Behind her stands the woman from the further, and beside that woman is Elise. Gemma looks at Elise. Elise looks at the photograph. Neither of them understands why Elise is standing there. Then the photograph changes. The woman disappears. Elise disappears. Only Gemma remains, and behind her is the dark figure. Elise suddenly realizes what the image means. The entity does not simply want Gemma. It wants to isolate her. It wants her to believe that everyone around her will eventually disappear. Because once Gemma believes she is completely alone, she will be much easier to control. Elise takes Gemma's hand. She tells her that the entity has one weakness. It cannot create genuine human connection. It can copy memories. It can copy voices. It can copy faces, but it cannot create the real bond between people. That is why it keeps trying to separate Gemma from everyone she trusts. Gemma realizes that the answer may not be another weapon. It may be trust. She looks at Elise. For the first time, she understands why the entity was so desperate to make them distrust each other. It knew that together, they were stronger. The darkness around them begins shaking. The photographs start falling from the walls. Something is coming. Elise tells Gemma that they need to find the center of this place. If they can reach it, they may be able to break the connection permanently. Gemma asks how they will find it. Elise points toward the darkest part of the room. There is a narrow doorway there. Unlike all the others, this one has no handle, only a small symbol carved into the center. Gemma recognizes the symbol immediately. It is the same mark that appeared on the key. The key may be gone, but perhaps she does not need it anymore. Gemma places her hand against the symbol. The door opens. Beyond it is not another room. It is an enormous space filled with thousands of doors. And at the center stands the woman from the photograph. She looks directly at Gemma. This time, she is not smiling. She tells Gemma that everything she has seen so far was only the beginning. Then she turns toward the darkness behind her. Something enormous moves in the distance. Elise whispers that they need to leave, but Gemma cannot move, because she finally understands what the woman meant when she said they had been waiting for her. The woman was not talking about one entity. She was talking about all of them. And whatever is standing in the darkness is the reason they have been waiting for someone like Gemma for so many years. The thing standing in the darkness does not move toward Gemma immediately. It simply watches her. Its presence alone seems to change the entire atmosphere around them. The thousands of doors surrounding the room begin to tremble, almost as if every door is connected to the same presence. Gemma looks at Elise, but Elise is staring at the figure without saying a word. For the first time, even Elise seems unsure of what they are facing. The woman from the photograph steps forward and tells Gemma that this is the place where the connection between the living world and the further began. According to her, the doors surrounding them are not ordinary entrances. Each one represents a connection created by someone who was able to cross between the two worlds. Some doors were opened by accident. Some were opened by grief. Others were opened because someone desperately wanted to bring a loved one back. But every door created a connection, and every connection gave something from the further a chance to get closer. Gemma asks why she was chosen. The woman tells her that she was not chosen. She was prepared. That answer hits Gemma harder than anything else she has heard. All those strange dreams from childhood, the unexplained visions, the moments when she felt watched, the things she thought she had imagined, none of them were random. Someone had been preparing her for years. The woman explains that Gemma's ability is different from the abilities of the others who came before her. She can enter the further, but more importantly, she can return without completely losing herself. That makes her extremely rare, and it makes her dangerous, because someone who can cross both worlds can also close the connection between them. The figure in the darkness moves slightly. Immediately, every door in the room slams shut. The sound echoes through the darkness. Gemma realizes that whoever is standing there does not want her to learn the truth. The woman tells her that the figure has been using people like her for a very long time. It cannot create a doorway on its own, so it waits for someone with the ability to open one. Once the doorway exists, the entity begins influencing that person. It appears in dreams. It creates false memories. It copies familiar faces. It whispers names. And slowly, it convinces the person that opening the door is the only way to save someone they love. Gemma realizes that this is exactly what happened to her. The entire journey was designed to make her believe she needed to open the door. The entity never needed to force her. It only needed her to choose. Elise tells Gemma that there is still time to stop it. But the woman disagrees. She says the process has already begun. Gemma looks down at her hands. The dark lines beneath her skin are more visible now. The connection is spreading. The longer she remains in the further, the stronger it becomes. If she waits too long, she may no longer be able to separate herself from it. Gemma asks what happens then. The woman says she will become a permanent bridge, a living doorway. The entity would no longer need to manipulate her. It would simply exist through her. That possibility terrifies Gemma. She asks whether there is any way to destroy the connection. The woman points toward the center of the room. There is a circular opening beneath the darkness. It looks almost like a well. But instead of water at the bottom, Gemma sees images moving inside. Her family. Her childhood. Her home. Every important memory she has ever had. The woman tells her that the connection feeds on those memories. Every memory the entity uses against her makes the bridge stronger. To close it, Gemma must willingly let go of the memory that matters most. Gemma immediately understands what that means. She has to choose. The entity suddenly speaks. Its voice is calm now. It tells Gemma that she does not have to lose anything. It promises that she can take everything back with her, her family. Her memories, her past, even the people she thought she had lost. All she has to do is open the final door. Gemma looks at Elise. Elise tells her not to listen. The entity continues. It shows Gemma images of the people she loves. They are happy. They are together. Nothing is wrong. For a moment, Gemma wants to believe it. The images are beautiful. There is no darkness. No fear. No monsters. Just the life she always wanted. The entity tells her that this can all be real. But Gemma notices one small detail. Nobody in the images is looking directly at her. They are smiling, but their eyes are empty. They are not people. They are memories. The entity is using the things she loves as decorations. Gemma realizes that it cannot give her what it promises. It can only imitate it. That realization breaks the illusion. The images disappear. The room returns to darkness. The entity becomes angry. The doors begin shaking violently. Elise tells Gemma to move toward the center. They run. The woman from the photograph stays behind. Gemma asks her to come with them. The woman says she cannot. She has already spent too much time in the further, but she can help Gemma reach the center. The woman places her hand against one of the doors. A bright opening appears. Gemma and Elise run through it. They emerge in a massive chamber. At the center is the same circular opening. Gemma looks down. She can see her own memories moving inside it. Then she sees something else, a memory she does not recognize. She is standing in a room as a child. Someone is holding her hand. Gemma looks closer. The person beside her is the woman from the photograph, but this time, Gemma remembers. The woman had been there when Gemma was a child. She had tried to protect her. She had warned her about the entity, and then she disappeared. Gemma finally understands their connection. The woman was not simply another victim. She was the person who helped Gemma escape the further when she was young. She had saved Gemma before, and now she is trying to save her again. Gemma looks at her with tears in her eyes. The woman tells her that she cannot come back with them, but she can give Gemma the one thing she needs, a choice that belongs entirely to her. The woman steps toward the center. She touches the edge of the opening. The entire chamber begins shaking. The entity appears behind them. This time, it is no longer hiding. It moves directly toward Gemma. Elise stands between them. She tells Gemma to focus on the opening. The entity attacks. Elise is thrown across the room. Gemma screams her name. The entity turns toward Gemma. It tells her that this is what happens when she trusts people. Everyone she loves will eventually disappear. Gemma looks at Elise lying on the ground. Then she looks at the woman. Then she looks into the opening. She understands what the entity is trying to do. It wants her to react emotionally. It wants her to believe that fear is the only thing left. But Gemma has finally learned how to use the connection without allowing it to control her. She closes her eyes. Instead of focusing on the people she is afraid of losing, she focuses on what they gave her. Love. Trust. Courage. The entity begins screaming. The darkness around it starts breaking apart. Gemma reaches toward the opening, and suddenly, the memories inside begin disappearing. One by one. Her childhood, her old home, the faces of people she remembers, the moments that shaped her. Everything begins fading. Gemma starts crying because she realizes what she is giving up, but she keeps going. The entity rushes toward her. Elise gets back on her feet and grabs Gemma's hand. Together, they push against the darkness. The woman from the photograph smiles for the final time. Then she steps backward into the darkness. She disappears. The opening begins closing. The entity screams that Gemma will regret this. Gemma does not answer. She pushes harder. The final memory disappears. The opening closes. The chamber becomes silent. For the first time, there are no voices. No footsteps. No whispers. Just silence. Gemma opens her eyes. She is standing beside Elise. The woman is gone. The thousands of doors are gone. The entity is gone. And the further around them is beginning to collapse. Elise looks at Gemma and tells her they have to leave now. Gemma nods. They begin running toward the only remaining light. But just before they reach it, Gemma hears something behind her. A voice. Very quiet. Very familiar. It says her name. Gemma stops. Elise grabs her arm and tells her not to turn around. Gemma knows she should keep moving, but then she realizes something. She no longer remembers whose voice it is, and that is when she understands the final cost of closing the connection. She may have escaped the further, but she may have lost part of herself along the way. Gemma keeps moving, even though the voice behind her continues calling her name. She does not turn around because Elise has already warned her that the moment she gives the voice her attention, the connection could begin rebuilding itself. Whatever remains inside the further wants one final reaction from her. Gemma reaches the light. For a second, she feels as though she is falling. Then she wakes up. She is lying in her own bed. The room is quiet. Morning sunlight is coming through the curtains, and everything looks normal. There is no darkness in the corners, no strange shadows, no whispering voices. Gemma slowly sits up. She looks around the room. For the first time in what feels like forever, she is home. Elise is sitting nearby. She looks exhausted, but she is alive. Gemma asks how long she has been asleep. Elise tells her only a few hours. Gemma looks confused. After everything that happened inside the further, she expected much more time to have passed. Elise explains that time inside the further does not follow the same rules. Gemma looks down at her hands. The dark marks are gone. She touches her fingers. Nothing happens. No visions. No voices. No strange sensation. For the first time, the connection seems completely silent. Elise tells her that the doorway appears to be closed, but she does not say that the danger is over. Gemma asks why. Elise says that closing the connection does not erase what happened. The memories may be gone, but the experience changed Gemma. She crossed into a place where very few living people can survive, and she came back. That alone may have consequences. Gemma asks about the woman. Elise becomes quiet. She tells Gemma that they never found her after the chamber collapsed. Gemma already knows what that means. The woman chose to remain behind so Gemma could escape. Gemma feels responsible. Elise tells her not to. The woman had been trapped for years. Helping Gemma was the first choice she had been able to make for herself in a very long time. Gemma asks whether she will ever see her again. Elise says she does not know. And for once, that uncertainty does not feel terrifying. It simply feels sad. Gemma begins remembering the people she saw in the photographs. She wonders whether they are still trapped. Elise tells her that the collapse may have changed the structure of the further, but she cannot know what happened to everyone inside. Some connections may have disappeared. Others may still exist. That means there are questions that may never be answered. But Gemma has survived. And now she has to learn how to live without constantly looking over her shoulder. For a while, everything seems normal. The family returns to their routine. The house feels peaceful again. Gemma spends time with the people she loves. She begins sleeping normally. She stops seeing shadows. She stops hearing voices. The strange dreams disappear. Days pass, then weeks. Slowly, Gemma starts believing that it is finally over. But there is one thing she notices. She cannot remember certain parts of her childhood. At first, she assumes it is because of everything she experienced. Then she realizes that some of her memories are missing completely. She remembers her family. She remembers her childhood home. She remembers school. But she cannot remember the face of the person who used to protect her. The woman from the further. Gemma knows the woman existed. She remembers her importance. But her face is gone. It is as if someone erased it from her memory. Gemma tells Elise. Elise says that may have been the price of closing the connection. The further needed something from Gemma. She gave it one of her memories. The memory of the woman may have been the thing she had to surrender. Gemma is devastated, but Elise tells her that sometimes survival comes with a price. The important thing is that the woman succeeded in protecting her. Gemma slowly accepts that. She begins rebuilding her life. She spends more time with her family. She becomes more present. She stops worrying about things she cannot control. And for the first time, she understands what the woman was trying to teach her. You cannot save everyone. You cannot control everything. And sometimes the strongest thing you can do is accept that some doors need to remain closed. Months pass. Nothing happens. The story begins to feel finished. Then one evening, Gemma is cleaning an old box of childhood belongings. She finds a photograph. She does not remember taking it. It shows her as a child. She is standing in front of her old house. Her family is beside her. Everything looks normal. Gemma almost puts it away. Then she notices something. In the upper corner of the photograph, there is a small dark shape. She looks closer. It is a person standing behind the window. Gemma freezes. She turns the photograph over. There is handwriting on the back, a sentence. It says that some doors can be closed without being destroyed. Gemma immediately calls Elise, but before she can finish the call, the lights in the house flicker. Once. Twice. Then they go out. Gemma stands completely still. She waits. Nothing happens. The lights come back. She looks at the photograph again. The figure behind the window is gone. For a moment, Gemma wonders whether she imagined it. Then she notices something else. The photograph is no longer the same. The version of Gemma standing in the picture is looking directly at her. Gemma slowly steps backward. The image smiles. Then the photograph falls from her hand. She runs out of the room. She calls Elise again. This time, Elise answers. Gemma tells her what happened. There is a long silence. Then Elise asks one question. Did you hear anything? Gemma says no. Elise asks whether she saw anyone. Gemma says no. Elise tells her that may actually be the worst sign. Because if something is trying to communicate, it usually wants you to know it is there. If nothing is happening, it may mean the entity is waiting. Gemma asks what it could be waiting for. Elise says she does not know, but she reminds Gemma of something they learned inside the further. The entity was never the only threat. There was something behind it, something older, something that had been watching. Gemma asks whether that thing survived. Elise does not answer. Instead, she tells Gemma to stay away from the photograph. Gemma looks at it from across the room. The image appears normal again. She asks Elise what she should do. Elise tells her to destroy it. Gemma hesitates. She remembers what happened when she tried to destroy the photograph before. It did not work, but this time, she does not have another option. She takes the photograph outside. She lights it. The edges begin burning. For a moment, nothing unusual happens. Then the photograph starts screaming. Not a human scream, something deeper, something that seems to come from far away. Gemma drops it. The fire goes out. The photograph remains untouched. Elise hears the sound through the phone. She tells Gemma to leave immediately. Gemma asks why. Elise says because the photograph was never meant to burn. It was meant to open. Gemma looks down. The photograph has changed again. There is now a doorway in the image, and standing inside that doorway is the woman Gemma thought she had forgotten. Her face is clearer than ever. She looks directly at Gemma. Then she raises one hand, not in anger, not in warning, almost like she is asking Gemma to follow. Gemma feels tears in her eyes. She does not know why. She cannot remember the woman's face, but something inside her recognizes her. Then the woman mouths two words, "Not yet." The photograph goes dark. Gemma steps back. For the first time, she understands that perhaps the story is not completely over. Maybe the woman did not disappear. Maybe she is still somewhere inside the further. And maybe the message is not an invitation. It is a warning. Because if the woman is still alive, then something else must have survived with her. Something that has been waiting for the connection to reopen. Gemma looks toward the house. The windows are dark. But one window upstairs suddenly lights up. A figure is standing behind it. Gemma cannot see the face. She does not move. The figure slowly raises its hand. And this time, Gemma does not hear her name. She hears someone else's. A name she has never heard before. A name that Elise recognizes immediately. And when Elise hears it through the phone, her voice changes completely. She tells Gemma that the name belongs to the first person who ever opened the door to the further. Someone Elise believed had been gone for decades. Someone who may have been waiting all this time for another doorway to appear. The name stays in the air for several seconds, and Gemma can hear the fear in Elise's voice even though Elise is trying to hide it. Gemma asks her who the person is, but Elise does not answer immediately. She tells Gemma to get inside, lock every door and window, and stay away from the upstairs room. Gemma looks toward the house again. The figure behind the window has disappeared, but she can still feel that someone is watching her. Elise finally explains that the name belongs to a man connected to one of the oldest cases involving the further. According to the records Elise once studied, he was the first person known to deliberately enter that world and return with the ability to open a passage for others. The case happened long before Gemma was born, and almost everything about it was eventually lost or deliberately hidden. The man disappeared after claiming that the further was not simply a place filled with spirits. He believed it was something much larger, almost like another layer of existence that had been separated from the living world. Gemma asks why Elise never mentioned him before. Elise admits that she did not want Gemma to know because the story sounded impossible even to her. The man had written about doors appearing in unexpected places, voices that could imitate dead relatives, and entities that did not behave like ordinary ghosts. But the most disturbing part of his notes was his belief that some spirits were not trapped in the further at all. They were choosing to remain there because they were waiting for the right person to open the way. Gemma immediately thinks about the woman from the photograph. She asks Elise whether the woman could have known this man. Elise says that is exactly what she is afraid of. The next morning, Gemma and Elise meet again. They bring everything they have collected from the investigation into one room. Photographs, notes, old recordings, drawings, and anything connected to the strange symbols they found throughout the story are placed on the table. For the first time, they are not simply trying to survive. They are trying to understand the entire pattern. Elise compares the symbol on the photograph with the symbol from the key. They look almost identical, but there is one important difference. The mark on the key is incomplete. A small section is missing. Gemma remembers the chamber inside the further. She remembers seeing the same symbol carved into the floor around the circular opening. Elise realizes that the key was never designed to lock the doorway by itself. It was part of a larger mechanism. Something had to complete the symbol from the other side. Gemma asks what could complete it. Elise looks at her. She says, a person. That possibility changes the entire meaning of what happened. Gemma was not simply carrying the key. She was the final piece of it. The entity needed her because without her, the mechanism could never be completed. Her ability to move between worlds made her the perfect bridge. That is why the entity spent so much time manipulating her instead of simply attacking her. It needed her alive. It needed her conscious. And most importantly, it needed her to believe that opening the doorway was her own decision. Gemma realizes that the final moment inside the further may have been part of the plan all along. Maybe the entity wanted her to close one doorway because closing it would force the connection to move somewhere else. And that somewhere else could be her. Elise tells her that they need to find the original records before anything else happens. They begin searching through old material connected to the first known case. Eventually, Elise finds a damaged notebook hidden inside an old box. Most of the pages are missing, but several remain intact. The handwriting is difficult to read. The first few pages describe the man's early experiences with the further. He claims that he could enter it during sleep, but eventually learned how to remain conscious while crossing the boundary. At first, he believed he had discovered a new world. Then he realized something was watching him. He described it as a presence without a face. It never attacked him directly. Instead, it showed him people he loved. It showed him his childhood. It showed him things that had not happened yet. And slowly, it convinced him that the further was not a prison. It was a place of possibilities. The man eventually became obsessed with opening a permanent doorway. He believed that death itself could be defeated if the boundary between the worlds disappeared. But the final pages tell a different story. He realized that the entities were not trying to escape into the living world because they wanted freedom. They wanted access. Access to human memories. Access to human emotions. Access to the living mind. He understood too late that a permanent doorway would not create peace between the worlds. It would erase the boundary that protected humanity from everything on the other side. The final surviving page contains only one sentence. It says that the first door was never closed. It was moved. Gemma reads the sentence again. She asks Elise what it means. Elise says there may be doors that exist outside the further, doors hidden in ordinary places, doors that can only be seen by someone who has already crossed the boundary. Gemma looks around the room. Suddenly, she notices something she had never paid attention to before. A small door in the wall. It is almost completely hidden behind a bookshelf. She tells Elise. Elise immediately becomes serious. They move the bookshelf away. The door is old. Much older than the house. There is no handle, only the same incomplete symbol. Gemma steps closer. She can feel something behind it. Not a voice, not a shadow, a presence. Elise tells her not to touch it. Gemma asks what happens if they leave it closed. Elise says they may be safe, but if the doorway has already appeared in the real world, then simply ignoring it may not be enough. The choice becomes impossible. Open it and risk bringing something through, or leave it closed and allow whatever is behind it to remain connected to Gemma. Before either of them can decide, the door makes a sound. 3 knocks. Gemma freezes. 3 more. Then silence. Elise slowly raises her hand toward the door. Gemma stops her. She says the entity used 3 knocks before. Elise realizes that this may be the same pattern that followed Gemma throughout the story. But then another sound comes from behind the door. A woman's voice. It is the voice of the woman from the photograph. She tells Gemma not to open the door. Gemma looks at Elise. They both hear it. The voice continues. It says that the man they have been searching for is not the person behind the door. He is the reason the door exists. Then the voice becomes quieter. She tells Gemma that the first person who opened the door did not disappear. He became part of it. Gemma asks what that means. There is no answer. The door suddenly begins shaking. The walls around it crack. Elise pulls Gemma away. A dark line appears beneath the door. It spreads across the floor like smoke. Then a hand slowly reaches underneath. Gemma steps backward. The hand is not human. Its fingers are unnaturally long, and the skin appears almost transparent. Elise tells Gemma to run. They leave the room and slam the main door behind them. But before Gemma can reach the stairs, she stops. She hears someone whispering, not from behind the door, from inside her own head. The voice tells her that she has misunderstood everything. Gemma closes her eyes. The voice says the woman from the photograph is not trying to protect her. She is trying to keep her trapped. Gemma refuses to believe it. But then the voice reveals something she cannot ignore. It tells her that the woman was the one who brought Gemma into the further when she was a child. Gemma opens her eyes. She looks at Elise. And Elise knows immediately that something has changed. Gemma asks her whether the woman was really protecting her all those years ago. Elise says she does not know. That answer is enough to create doubt. The house suddenly becomes completely silent. No movement. No whispers. No footsteps. Then the small door upstairs opens by itself. Elise looks toward it. Gemma looks to and standing in the doorway is the woman from the photograph. But this time, she is not inside a memory. She is physically standing in the house. She looks at Gemma and says that there is no more time. Then she turns toward the darkness behind her. A second figure appears. Then a third. Then several more. Gemma realizes the truth. The doorway was never meant to bring one entity into the real world. It was meant to bring them all. And now the first door has finally opened again.